So welcome everyone to the third talk on mindfulness and anxiety and habit loops. So today we're focusing on mindfulness and sustainable habit change. So we've looked at, in the first step, we looked at mapping out what our anxiety habit loops were, the trigger, the behavior, and the reward or the result. And it's really important that we map those out. And in many ways, you never stop doing that. So it's not like it's step one, step two, step three, you're done. It's more like you just keep doing step one, step two, and step three continuously. And in the second phase of it, we saw what the reward or the result of the habit loop was, what the, we kept seeing repeatedly that the habit loop brings us, the result is more anxiety for the most part. And we keep seeing this over and over again. And this kind of forces the brain to want to update the reward. And this is where the third step comes in. Remember, in the second step, we were asking ourselves, what do I get out of this this habit loop? What do I get out of it? And we start to see over and over that suffering arises. So if we're relating it to the second noble truth, we're really seeing over and over how we, through our craving, create suffering. So in the third step, we're looking at shifting the behavior, or substituting a new internal behavior that doesn't feed the craving of the habit. So this is very critical. And in psychology, they would call this the coming up with the bigger, better offer. And the Buddha would talk about it in terms of seeing the cessation of suffering when craving and clinging is not present. It's important that it's an internal, and I'll talk more about this, that it's an internal substitute, because it's something that's then always available. It's not something we have to go and get that's external to us. So for sustainable change to occur, we need to find this bigger and better offer that's more rewarding and doesn't feed the habit loop. Right? So we're not substituting just any behavior, right? We have to be careful that it's not a behavior that is simply, an alternate way of feeding the craving or feeding the habit loop. So the example I gave, when I was, 4 o'clock would come, I would feel boredom and a little stress from the boredom. My habit loop was to grab a beer out of the fridge and watch the news, and the result was more anxiety and stress and shame as well, that I was drinking a beer at that time of day. So what arose for me, and it just kind of came up, is, well, maybe a way to deal with this is to go downstairs and do some yoga practice. And so that's what I substituted as the new behavior. And the reward, of course, was a sense of peace and tranquility is what arose for me. So it was really easy for the limbic brain was basically going, oh, I like this better. I'll do this, right? It was very easily, easy to switch over to this more rewarding behavior. James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, he points out that because bad habits, he calls them, provide some type of benefit in your life, it's difficult to simply eliminate them, right? This is why the just stop doing it doesn't work. So using the prefrontal cortex to direct to direct, willpower of some kind to just stop doing it. Rarely, if ever, works. You could say the prefrontal cortex is kind of the weaker cousin of the limbic brain, the older brain. So it really can override. The new brain can really override the older limbic brain and stop an anxiety habit loop. But we often default to this, right? We often default to either using willpower or trying to figure out why, right? The prefrontal cortex wants to go, okay, I'm feeling anxiety. Why am I feeling this anxiety? Let me figure this out. And we will continually do this, even if it's unsuccessful. It's amazing to watch how we will continually do this. We will continually try to figure out why we're experiencing anxiety, even though it doesn't work. And I think this is partly, excuse me, because it works in other parts of our life so well, right? We probably, many of us could be in jobs where we we analyze things, we problem solve, that's what we do, right? And this works for us. So we should be able to transfer this to our emotional lives as well, and we should be able to figure out where the anxiety is coming from. In the other group that I'm doing this with, that they actually came up, the person said, anxiety comes up, and then I'm really trying to figure out why, but I can't figure out why. And I said, well, how does that make you feel? So well, I get really anxious. I said, well, this is an anxiety habit loop, right? Stress arises. Behavior is I try to figure out why, and the result is more stress, more anxiety. So we can actually look at, well, again, we come up with what do I get out of this? And then coming up with a substitute or a bigger and better offer. So instead of trying to figure out why, we need to replace this so-called bad habit with a new habit that provides a bigger and better, more satisfying benefit. Right? In a way, we're hacking the limbic brain, right? Because that's how it operates. It's this kind of operant conditioning, going back to the experiments by B.F. Skinner, where he found this, and you see this in your pets, that you can train them using operant conditioning, and our brains operate in very similar ways. Another example, for example, if you smoke when you get stressed, it likely won't work just to tell yourself to stop smoking. If this was the case, there wouldn't be a lot of people smoking. When the craving arises, you can't just say stop smoking. Instead, you have to come up with a different way to deal with the stress and insert a new behavior instead of having a cigarette. Of course, there's also a physical aspect to smoking that would have to be dealt with. So it's better to look at coming up with a substitute behavior instead of trying to use our willpower. So resistance is futile. You could say, James Erskine, in a study called Resistance Can Be Futile, says investigate, and the title is Resistance Can Be Futile, Investigating Behavioral Rebound. And what he says is, when we suppressed they did an experiment where they asked people just suppress thoughts about eating chocolate. So they had a bunch of people that really like chocolate. So when the craving arises, simply suppress the thought about eating the chocolate. And what they found was the folks trying to suppress it had a behavioral rebound effect, that they consumed more chocolate than the people that didn't try to suppress the thoughts and just ate the chocolate. Do you see what I mean? So suppressing it actually created more. There was a rebound effect where they actually consumed more chocolate than the control group, which wasn't trying to suppress the thought of eating chocolate. When I heard that experiment, I thought, wow, that really puts, what you resist persists, or what I like to say, what you resist amplifies in an experimental perspective, right? I mean, people are resisting by trying to suppress thoughts about doing something. And you can transfer this, I'm sure, to other things other than eating chocolate. So mindfulness, curiosity, these are effective substitute behaviors that are more satisfying, have a more satisfying reward, and does not feed the craving. And so that's what in the guided meditation, we were looking at just bringing mindfulness and curiosity to what was present. So that's the new, in many cases, that's the bigger, and I'll give more examples, but what I'm finding is bringing mindfulness to it, curiosity is awareness is the bigger and better offer. Is the substitute behavior. With my drinking beer in the afternoon example, it happened to be mindful yoga, but it's still a mindfulness practice. So we're opening and allowing the stress. We're opening to it, sensing into how's it feel in the body. What's the total experience of this stress? That becomes the new way of engaging with the stress, rather than the suppressing, distracting kinds of behaviors that we might engage in. In fact, as I practiced with this over the week, I was something happened that I didn't expect, because I was looking at anxiety habit loops, but I started looking at more subtle, at a much more subtle level of stress arising. And what I started to notice was, sometimes you're doing something and your mind just starts thinking about something else, right? And what I started to notice was this was a kind of habit loop. Getting lost in thought, it was kind of a habit loop for me. And then the result was kind of a current of stress and anxiety. And not an explosive amount, but just this current of unease, I guess you could call it, that arose just from getting lost in thought. I could barely even notice what the trigger was. I started to notice, there, I'm lost in thought. How do I feel in this moment? There's this sense of unease. So I started to practice with this, noticing it repetitively over and over again. And I started to notice that the limbic brain was less interested in just going off in random thought processes. It was staying much more present, or just being quiet. As I noticed that. But previously I hadn't come at it this way as a habit loop. I had just come at it as, loss in thought, come back to the present moment, right? Loss in thought, come back to the present moment. This was, this is a very subtle habit loop that I'm engaged with. The trigger is this, I want something more out of this present moment. So the mind's just going to go off and do its, create something more. And it was seen as an anxiety habit loop. Some other examples. The typical one is stress arises, junk food. Eat junk food, result shame, anxiety, or some form of that, right? And that's a common When junk food, insert your go-to, whatever that might be. Doesn't have to be junk food, but so we're looking at a BBO, bigger and better offer, that is more rewarding, but doesn't feed the habit loop. Okay. So, I was asking Vida, my wife, about this. She said, well, how about a healthy snack instead of junk food? So, well, it's healthier, but does it meet the criteria of not feeding the habit loop? So try it. Try a healthy snack. So stress arose, healthy snack, still anxiety. There was still, the stress wasn't resolved, right? It was still a distraction from the stress. Right. So it still feeds the habit loop. And it's so easy actually to slip back into non-healthy foods, right? Because the craving's still there, the stress, the loop is still there. So it's, well, maybe I'll just have, this kind of, it's got a little bit of chocolate in this one, but or it's got a little bit of, it's not deep fried. It's kind of it's like a healthy chip, right? It's baked. It's a baked chip. I can eat a bag of those, right? And so you just start to, because of course the marketing departments that make all this junk food know that we in many cases want to substitute a healthy option, right? And so they're coming up with putting out there what appear to be healthy options for us. But using this approach, we're not replacing it with a healthy option. We're actually substituting a behavior that does not feed the loop at all. So can you think of a behavior that's more rewarding, that's internal and doesn't feed the habit loop? We had, stress over big to-do list, behavior procrastination, result anxiety. So again, and we also had another person with stress over a to-do list, or just stress, work really, really hard, work beyond limit, exhausted and anxious. So the procrastinator at least wasn't exhausted, but so you've got these two very different ways of responding to stress over work. So can you think of a behavior, a better, bigger and better offer besides procrastination or working beyond our limits, that doesn't feed the habit loop, is internal, and is more rewarding? So that's the home practice for the week, is map out what types of bigger and better offers you can use as substitute strategies for your anxiety habit loops. So ask, do they feed the loop? And one way to kind of see this is, does it result in restlessness, contraction, a temporary fix, a desire for more? These are all signs that you're feeding the habit loop. Or do they allow you to step out of the stress, step onto a different path? So the three, again, I'll just repeat the three, I guess, criteria of a substitute strategy or substitute behavior is: it's internal, doesn't feed the habit loop, and it's more rewarding. And you saw how they weren't rewarding in the second step by saying, what do I get out of this? So now you're going, okay, what can be more rewarding? And mindfulness and curiosity are good examples of substitute behaviors. Just resting in awareness of what is present when the stress trigger is noticed. Mindful movement, a breathing space, just a simple pause and look. Uh, RAIN, the acronym RAIN, a mantra. For the woman that raised the habit loop of stress, try to figure out why more stress. I recommended a mantra for her. The mantra was "Why doesn't matter." So, why doesn't matter. We're sensing into the what of it, the felt experience, the felt sense of it. So in the guided meditation, we did RAIN, basically. That's RAIN is an acronym that seems to be making the rounds a lot these days that people are using. Michelle McDonald coined it, I think 30 odd years ago. I first heard Michelle McDonald refer to RAIN. In the end was a non-identify. And I taught it that way for many, many years. Recognize, investigate, accept, not identify or non-identify. Tara Brach, I don't know, 10 years or so ago, started using it and turned the N into nurture. The N seems to be the one that has a life of its own. And I just noticed Judson Brewer just used the same acronym and changed the N into noting. So yeah, so you can use whatever you want, do whatever you want with the N part of that acronym. But basically, you're recognizing that a trigger has arisen. Right? You recognize the trigger. You recognize, there's stress. If that's your trigger, so you just recognize it. Then that in itself can be very, very powerful. Just that recognition. So you don't kind of, clench your jaw and get ready. You just kind of, there it is. There it is. You just let go and let go of control and just feel it coming on. Since you have no control over it anyway, right? And you've probably tried suppressing and distracting and denying, and it hasn't worked. So you've seen that in the second step. So you just say, okay, it's here it is. So you recognize it. Then you just allow and accept. That's the A. Oh, somebody just entered the talk. So you just allow and accept. You accept it just as the way it is. It's okay. You're open to it just the way it is. You can even say, I see you, whatever it is. I see you, Mara. I see you, stress. I see you. Just that statement just recognizes that that you're allowing, accepting what's occurring. So you're not distracting yourself. You're not trying to do something about it. You're just saying, here's the experience. I'm going to be present for it. And then the eye is investigated. Just bring this curiosity. And what's going on right now? What's going on in the body? What's going on in the senses? You don't have to even go looking for anything. You just open and be curious. So what arises? What's most prominent in your experience right now? So just letting it kind of come to you rather than going, okay, I got to go look and find this. It might be very subtle. So just letting it come to you, getting curious. Where does it originate? What part of the body? Is it shifting? Is it changing? Are there other sensations coming up? What is it sensing into what it really feels like. Is there tightness in the chest, contractions, so many different rest, shallow breath? Is there burning, tension, clenching, heat? Is there a pit in the stomach, pressure? Really sensing into all of this. And shallow breath is a real telltale. We use that in yoga, right? A shallow or a ragged breath. The yoga instructor will, use that as a telltale. Say, you might be going into the posture too much if you noticed you're holding your breath, or your breath gets very shallow or gets very ragged. So the breath can be a really good telltale and way to sense into the stress. And then the note, if you want to use Judson Brewer's, and it's just noting what's coming up, using words or phrases like the noting that we do in our practice. And this is just, what I think this does, what's interesting about it is that you're often noting thoughts, storytelling that comes up. So this just keeps you focused in the present. So if you don't get kind of carried away on a thought train, it kind of keeps you out of the figuring out mode, the answering that why question. And then you just surf the wave until it subsides. And then look at how you feel. And that's, you'll feel the result, the reward, which may not be more anxiety. And that over time, the limbic brain kind of goes, oh, this is a bigger and better offer. This is more rewarding if I just stay present with the stress, as opposed to suppressing, denying, distracting, whatever those behaviors might be. So I'll open it up for some questions, comments about this talk and previous talks, or anything else that's coming up in your meditation practice.